Welcome to Alive Partner TV. I am your host, Dr. Mario Torres Leon. What an honor and a privilege to have you here with us today. And I am beyond excited because we're continuing today what we have been creating as a tradition here in the channel, which is the HPS or the Human Power Series. Today, I am honored to be guesting and pretty much having her in our home here with us, a super powerful woman of Indian heritage, and her name is Dr. Sweta Chawla. And I am beyond excited to have her here. And I don't want to take the wind off her sails because I want her to talk about her background and what she does. But there has been a tremendous, impactful sort of impact that the GL28 program has had in her life, as as it was for many people that were with us in the last cycle of GL28. We had a global community be part of this. And one of the reasons why I felt compelled and I'm honored to have had her accept our invitation to join us in the Human Power series was her degree of vulnerability, her degree of willingness, her degree of willing to be seen by other people, which is something that I continue to find extremely difficult in the times we're living in. If you're new to my community, you probably have never heard what I talk about, which is the IHB or the invisible human virus. If you have heard some of my videos before, then this topic is not new for you. But this woman essentially was able to create an antidote on the fly because of her willingness and her courage. And despite having a very public and very visible line of work, which I'll let her speak to, she actually took it to a whole new level and not only transformed my life in her sharing and going to the depth that she did during the 28 journey, but I know for a fact that she also was able to transform because of her courage and her willingness the lives of essentially 200 people that were part of this community during that process. So, Sweta, thank you. Thank you for being here with us. It's such an honor and a privilege to have you. And thanks for your time, generosity to share with our audience.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I really believe the only reason I was able to show up so vulnerably was because of the space that you create. So thank you for that. And I'm really looking forward to sharing some of the magic because I think that's the key of a lot of the things that really were created in that space as we kind of connect today.
Sweta, as we take a little deeper dive into this, tell our community and the viewers, share with us, if you will, please, your background, because you really live in the line of true empowerment through your work. And I'm excited that you're going to be sharing that because some people I know will resonate with what you do, and they may actually find you as a resource, as somebody who is in this community who resonates with the kind of work that we do, to reach out to you for your services and for your support of what they're doing in their particular lives.
Sure, I'm happy to share. So in my former life, I was a clinical pharmacist and a professor. And I was in that role for a decade until I gave premature birth of my son. And it was a big wake up call for me. My son came into the world 2 pounds and 9 ounces. And I feel like he came in the world that small to show me how small I was living.
Mm.
I thought that I was living really big, doctor, professor, New York City condo, right? Like all of these accolades and titles, but that wasn't what I was meant to, how I was meant to serve in the world, really. It was on the perimeter, I would say, but it really wasn't my full expression and service. And it started a journey of going within, and doing that deep work that I think, as people in healthcare professionals, we what we are taught about healing, what we are taught about symptoms and sources of discomfort, whether it is physical or emotional. There's so much more that we don't really are never taught. We don't learn until we hit kind of these really hard moments where we're like, we're working so hard, we're trying so hard. Why is nothing working? And so I started to do the work that I think you really hold such wonderful space for, which was I started to learn how to feel. And that was the thing that I didn't know how to do. I was just trying to get through, push through, survive and succeed. And through that journey, I started working with a coach, and I thought I was working on my career, But as most of us holistic practitioners know, that it's always much bigger than that. And I started to really connect deeper to like what why I'm here, what my purpose is. And so today I'm a leadership coach and facilitator. That's my
Mm,
title, right? But I really it's much more profound than that. My work is very holistic because every to me you're one person. So people come to me when they're an emerging leader or a mid-career professional senior leader who feels stuck, they're at a crossroads. And really I take them through this holistic leadership development, which is about some of the very similar work that you do of really being able to connect to themselves, understand their journey and their story, but mostly give themselves permission to just really want what they want. I find like that's the hardest thing for really hardworking people to do. You know, they're so good at showing up and being dutiful and being, solution oriented and being there for everyone else. But when it comes to themselves, hearing their own voice, giving themselves permission to receive, it is so hard. It requires a ton of vulnerability. And I had such a deep challenge with that my whole life too. But through that experience, I was not willing to go through an experience of losing someone in my life again because I was so afraid of that. And
mm.
that's one of the reasons why I'm so committed to, even if it's really scary, to be vulnerable and to show up, and have the discernment to know where are the spaces that I can do that. And GL28 and with you was one of those spaces.
Thank you. That's really beautiful and powerful. For those of you who are joining us, I'm having a conversation with Dr. Sweta Chawla. And as you might have heard just her say, she's a leadership coach from a holistic approach, which is incredibly powerful. She was speaking to this aspect of these leaders learning to give themselves permission. At the very beginning of this conversation that we're having, I was talking about the aspect of the IHV, or the invisible human virus. And in over 30 years that I've been in medicine, I can't think truthfully of anything that is impairing human capability and human health more than this aspect of us, giving ourselves permission, which is to say, I am not going to be seen. It's really a deep premise of our work here in the Alive Partner Committee, as you know, Sweta, to really be in a judgment-free zone. And this is something that is very cliche. It's said a lot, and no judgment this, no judgment that. One thing is to say it, another thing is to create spaces for people to experience it. And that can only be experienced when one is willing to meet the depth of all the judgment and the criticism that we put ourselves through. And as you well know from your line of work, and maybe you can speak a little bit to this, the higher the degree of achievement professionally, academically, there is, the deeper the sense of ingrainment there is of being a perfectionist and not allowing certain things to come in. The deeper the degree of I am source, but I cannot be resourced. And when those things happen, we are, in the holistic world, this is well understood, at least in my experience. We become active blockers of this torus of energy that is essential in the universe, where to be able to be a great giver, in the case of the healthcare givers, right? You must invoke being a tremendous or equal in magnitude receiver. Yet somewhere along the line, as you know, because you're a professional in this field, we have lost sense of the importance of the receiving piece of the equation for us to be able to amplify how much we give, how much we serve, and ultimately to be able to put our stake on the ground humbly but firmly in declaring what are the things that matter to us and we want to manifest or experience. Can you talk to that? Because this is really a very important distinction that you're making.
You've gotten right to the main core of it, is that judgment and that lack of receiving. And you brought one of three archetypes that I often see when I'm coaching people that are in this leadership position that's really focused on excelling and serving. It's the perfectionist, the people pleaser, and the overworker. And, most of us have all three of them in some way or the other. But essentially, it comes to this place where, and I just want to also say before I even go into it, because it can feel when someone hears this, you can start to feel bad about yourself. I remember I was like, I'm not a perfectionist. I part crooked. I send out emails with, grammar issues and stuff. But then I had a big wake up call when I realized what a perfectionist I'm in relationships and how I want to be seen. Right. And giving is an act of it sometimes can be an act of trying to control, right? It's controlling our situation because we are so afraid of what happens if we can't control it because the feelings are we don't know how to navigate them. We don't know how. And in our school systems, right? Most healthcare providers or anyone that's a leader is oftentimes highly, highly educated. And our school systems teach us to excel. You have to, get good grades, be on top of it, always be on, always be progressing. Where are we ever taught about compassion and vulnerability and receiving and resilience and navigating hard situations? Like we don't, and we're not taught about it. And if you're an immigrant like me, like you, it's even more amplified because our parents come to this country as a way to survive, and succeeding accomplishments is how you create safety. And so I really want to honor if that is your background, because I think that generation, what we went through, we did what we could with what we had, and we have the privilege now of having spaces like this, having practices like yours and mine, where we get to go deeper, we get to go higher, and we can actually ask for more. I'm just amazed when I have clients now. Before, I felt like I had to I always, meet people where they are. And so they'll come in with, oh, I need time management issues, or I want more executive presence, or I want to get a promotion, right? And I kind of then have to like sneak in and help them to kind of see the bigger and holistic picture, right? Because really, when you're in a matrix of surviving and striving, it's so different because what people are really looking for is to have authentic impact and quality of life. And that doesn't come from that. It comes from thriving. And thriving is really so much more based on these bigger systems that are beyond our education system and our healthcare systems, which are really manufactured. They're manufactured, and they're based on, not this holistic lens that we've been talking about. They're not in alignment with nature. They're not in alignment with, I know you talk a lot about divine feminine and divine masculine energy. I mean, it's missing in that matrix. It's really a lot of it's based on shadow masculine structures. And so oftentimes if we're not in that, striving, succeeding, always progressing, always producing more, we think we're not doing enough, we think we're failing. And of course you're going to feel that way if you're showing up in that system. But when you start to see that that's actually not the natural system, and when you start to align and you start to notice that the choices you're making are showing up in these archetypes of perfectionism, of people pleasing, of overworking, and you start to realize that that's actually not who you are. It's a way you learn to respond in the system. It's pretty brilliant if you think about it, right?
It
And it
is.
good.
It is, and I was going to say, Sweta, um, you said something that is spot on. You said that we are not taught how to feel, right? The more sophisticated we have become, and I speak quite a bit about this, the more we continue to revere the brain and we continue to hammer down the age of the Enlightenment. You're so brilliant. Oh my gosh, the IQ is through the roof. You're such a genius, right? We're still having that conversation. I don't want to fight the conversation, but I want to be curious about how can we make the conversation whole
Yes.
by bringing awareness to other pieces that are not being recognized. Um, and this is a it's a tremendous departure from conventional wisdom and how we approach subjects. Why is that? Because it's not black or white. It's not one or the other. It's not this binary way of approaching it. It's an encompassing way of doing it. Your head, last time I checked, seems to be attached to your body. And so is mine, right? But if I'm living from here, I'm missing out on, at least volumetrically speaking,
Yeah.
97% of this embodiment that I call the human body of mine, and yours for the same matter, right? So what became very apparent to me, especially having the medical background in a very allopathic way, which is very cookie cutter and very locked up, is like, but what else? What's happening to the sum of all the parts that I'm not really taking into account? Otherwise, going back to these archetypes that you were referring to, then if one is not working, the brain will find a way to try to lock myself into a different one to be able to compensate for the pieces that I'm actually neglecting consciously or subconsciously,
Yep.
right? So the big discovery and the big aha that came through my journey, and I like to say very specifically, this is not an invention of mine, a creation of mine. This is part of the field of awareness. There's intelligence that is, I really believe, and I've experienced it, is surrounding us all the time. The more I open my eyes, the proverbial eyes, to that intelligence, that wisdom, that information that is floating around us. Some people may call it channeling. Some people may, I had a light bulb moment, whatever we may want to call it. Culturally has different names too. Religious inclinations may have different ways to speak about it, but there's a universality to it. And
Mhm.
that is that we all have access to that, no matter where we were born on the planet.
Mhm.
Um, and the moment that I became aware that this activation of the feeling body, not just by sensing, but by being able to couple what is it that I'm feeling to where is the anatomical representation of where it's being felt, then I can actually leverage the brain, rightfully so, for a more holistic experience if we're actually invoking your world, professionally speaking, to be able to have a different conversation, a
Mhm.
more informed conversation that truly creates more power in the impact and service that we can have and bring onto others. Is that resonating?
Yeah, and I'd love to contextualize this because this is
Please,
one of my superpowers here. So I want to share about how I ended up joining GL28. Okay.
please.
I think it speaks to what you're talking about here. And first, before I'll even say that is, I have this model. It's called Leadership Beyond Ladder, and it has three pillars. So the bottom pillar is your authentic identity. The top pillar is empowered expression, and then there's the third pillar, which is about thriving structures. And in that, I talk about what you just mentioned here. I call it co-creation.
See,
So that, there's this Rumi quote that's one of the foundational quotes that I use in my coaching practices. What you're seeking is seeking you, right? And that's why it's so like important for you to give yourself permission to want what you want. I'm not talking about ego wants, right? I'm talking about the wants that are deep in here. But like you said, if you're cut off, the heart does not judge feelings. It doesn't say good or bad. But if you judge, I don't want to feel pain, I don't want to feel grief, I don't want to feel anxiety, I don't want to feel anger, then guess what? You don't get to feel joy. You don't get to feel love. You don't get to feel connection, right? There's so many other it's you have to be willing to be with feelings in a way that's not, like you said, non-judgmental. That is so the right or wrong, the binary is again where we get stuck because all the magic is in that higher thriving that I call it, you were talking about kind of that field. And so to contextualize this, I still remember it so clearly. The day before I joined GL28, I'm a facilitator at Stanford University Business School. And I was having tea with my friend, and I had a pretty hard year last year, and I've been living in this co-creative field for years. And I'm going to tell you, it's very magical. It's the place where uncertainty becomes the place of possibility, where you don't fear the unknown. You actually are like, what's the mystery have for me? And when you can get over that fear piece and, and be in spaces and communities and get support where people understand. Because this is not a linear path. People think that there's safety in linearity. Yes, but then you miss out on all the other things like you mentioned. You cut yourself off and people, especially when you're in, in our what our souls came and where we are in our lives, midlife crisis or whatever you want to call it, it's really a call for that greater expression of why we're here. And so I was having tea with my friend and and I know it came from here because it was like kind of emotional and I was like, I miss my magic.
Mm,
I felt like I lost it the year before.
mm,
I know I didn't lose it, but I didn't feel connected to it. And it was Galentine's Day. It was like, a couple days right before Valentine's Day. And it was also the full moon in Leo. I'm a little bit of an astro nerd here. But I'm telling you, it connects the dots to what happened in my experience with you. And then we had a training with all the other facilitators. And at the end, someone passed out some hearts and they were like, for Valentine's Day, we'd like for you to share what you're committing to for yourself or others in the next 2 weeks. And when my heart came to me, I had something I was going to say from up here, but then my heart was like, I'm recommitting to my magic.
mm.
And I was like, I am a very magical person. And
Yes, you are.
to say this at Stanford University, right? And having come from academia, where everything is about data and science, right? Having been a clinical pharmacist, I mean, it took a while and it took some courage to get to this place and the safety and comfort that I've created in that place. But literally the next day, I joined GL28 because I got an email and I've been wanting to up my gratitude. I have a
Mm.
very strong intention practice and it's in community. And so I know I thrive in those spaces and I wanted to have a more magical, connected experience with gratitude. And so this offer came in and I joined. And the very first thing was, we're going to be using a book called The Magic. Like,
Yeah.
that is not a coincidence.
No.
This is that thriving co-creation conversation with something greater than you. I mean, think about it. Like, we're so afraid to surrender. We're so afraid to not have control. But why would you want to work so hard? I mean, imagine where you live in a world where you can say, this is what I desire. And then there's this greater power that's beyond the limitations and the structures of what we know, what we've been taught, that says, okay, I'm going to show you where you can get it. Right. But you got to be open. You got to be looking. You got to be listening and not just be like, that's just a coincidence. It is not. It's guidance.
We have been in conversations with Dr. Sweta Chawla, and this is simply amazing. Today is another incredible episode in the Human Power series. And if this is the first time that you've been watching this, I'm going to invite you to look into some of the other episodes that we have here in the Life Partner TV show, because really we have been blessed to have absolutely incredible human beings. And today's conversation, which is not over yet, is not an exception. So stay tuned for the next things that we're going to be talking here in a second. So there's definitely no accident in this whole thing of the magic, that came into the message for you, pairing up with the magic the next day. It's definitely not an accident. Talk about what happened when you started the GL28 journey, and then clearly there was something that you wanted to manifest in that journey. Reconnecting with that magic in your life, the deep awareness that something was missing. You didn't know exactly what the journey was going to be like, but something inside of you already knew.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
then what? Then what?
So as for people who are listening who've not been through the program, I don't want to give too much away, all the details, but there's themes. There's every day there's themes, and we're invited to share in the community around those themes. And one of the themes was about desires. And because I am the people that I work with, that is the hardest thing for me to be able to give myself permission to share. And it was like, what are your top 10 desires?
Yes.
Right. And so I set an intention that morning and I purposely said, I'm going to wait till the end of the day because I don't want it to come from here. And
Mm.
at the end, in like towards the end of the day, I came across, it was like a meme or a message on Threads or Instagram. and it talked about spotlight trauma.
Mm.
And it talked about, it said you don't have imposter syndrome. You don't, it's not self-doubt. It's really this, it's about being exposed, right? And that was that word exposure that really, and I just had a visceral reaction. I got a sharp pain in my body, and then I felt all this energy go up my left leg. I didn't know what any of it meant, but because, we know that feeling speaks in the body, as you always share, right? I knew it was my body was telling me something. And so I shared that my intention is to feel safe being in the spotlight. And literally the next day, you had you do these group calls, and this is something I didn't expect. You have these heel seats.
Mhm.
So I saw your first heel seat and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna allow myself because my body was telling me something. Here's this opportunity. I saw your work, so I felt comfortable. And I was like, okay, and I just want to say for anybody's listening, well, maybe I'll share this a little bit afterwards because I think it's significant to the healing that I had.
Please.
And through that heel seat, you just held a very deep space. And there were certain things that came up that I felt in my body. And there was, you mentioned something about light, and I had a headache. And the minute that you said that word, my body just softened.
See.
And so I knew there was something around that. And then it came to me was that, like, I'm afraid of my light.
Yeah.
It's not something I didn't already know, right? Because I've been doing this work for a decade, more than a decade, right? But I think there was just this deeper layer that was ready to really integrate. And since then, I mean, I can tell you, like, I can connect the dots. I mean, there's definitely like things that can look very literal of how that unfolded. But on a deeper level, what I can tell you is it was that judgment piece because that came up a lot in that healing as well around judgment. And in the next few weeks, I had such a release of that.
Mhm.
And there's a part of me that is a little bit like, I don't know if I should share this because it feels like so esoteric, so deep, but I'm gonna do it. um, but
You clearly are practicing GL28. Yes, and good for you.
Yeah. So I'm an astro nerd too. So I can connect the dots in astrology and kind of the cycle. So the minute I said I want to connect to my magic, it was a full moon in Leo, right? Full moons are bright and shiny. Leo is all about taking the stage. So it's like, yeah, okay, this is what you're ready for. This is if you say yes, right? Here's who's going to help you, you and the community, right? Because even during that healing seed, it was you, but you also brought other people on to reflect and to be seen in that way and to have that reflection. And I'm specific going to say this from the masculine, right? Is really, really powerful. A lot of my work is around the divine feminine as well.
Mhm.
And so a lot of that around receiving, right? Or softening. But one thing that I've uncovered in the last few years, and I'm seeing this with a lot of my clients as well, is a lot of divine feminine. There's divine feminine and there's feminism. And I think some of the aspects of feminism that previous generations that we've kind of learned are not fully what a lot of the way the feminine is wanting to be expressed right now. I have many women who want to just soften,
Mm.
want to maybe not work, who want to rely on their husband, who want to take a break, and they feel like they're betraying all the progress of feminism, right? And what I'm really, really have been really shifting is this idea of the masculine and feminine being competitive. And over the past few months, last year, I've just gotten a very deep, deep message that in Hinduism, this is actually what we're taught. Like the feminine is that frequency. It's the you can't see it. It's the feelings, right? It's the things you can't see, and that's why we don't value it because so many of our structures is on the masculine, right? But there's something about the masculine witnessing the feminine that
Mm,
makes it come into form. And so having somebody in the divine masculine embodying, holding that divine masculine presence was necessary for this aspect of me to come into form fully or to heal or and there were ripples of that. So I'm Hindu, but my husband's Catholic. We go to a Catholic church. I've had a very push and pull relationship with Christianity and with Jesus. I feel like in past life, I have a very strong relationship with Jesus. My father came to me in a dream and told me that I needed to go to Mary Magdalene's cave in France, and I went, and the whole message was about loving Jesus and forgiving the masculine. It
mm,
was just
mm,
so many it's forgive the masculine, forgive the masculine. And it was really fascinating. We joined this new church, and initially I was very like, I want them to know I'm not Christian, right? I was like, hold on to
mm,
that. Like, I want them to know, I want them to know. But the next time I went to church, they do this Holy Communion, and they're like, you can take it, you don't have to drink. Nobody's looking at you. They all get in a circle. And I had this stuff around it, but this next time that I went, like it was not there. And I was like, I'm worthy of having this. I'm worthy of having this masculine love, Jesus's love, whatever it is. Like, I don't need to be Christian, right? I don't like all of the stuff that I had on it, all that judgment was just gone. And I'm like being seen as offering leadership in that church now because I'm doing a service project on, creating safety kits for the unhoused. And it had nothing to do with I'm trying to like be a leader in this community. It was where's my heart aligned with what's aligned in that church? And instead of where are we separate? Where do I not belong? I think and I think that, when you've gone through that, if you're a woman, if you're from another country, if you're just like a human being that has any feelings or emotions in this world, there's probably a part of you that feels like you don't belong being who you are, right? And then that becomes our narrative as we go into spaces. Do I fit? Do I not fit? As
mm,
opposed to like, where is the light wanting to be illuminated through me,
mm,
right? Instead of putting the spotlight on where am I right, where am I wrong, which is what so much of that spotlight is, right? Or it's a performance. It was really about shifting that to like, where is the light wanting to illuminate through me? And as long as I was in that judgment space, I wasn't be able to kind of receive that. And so this has been a long journey. And I got a really big sign afterwards, a couple weeks later, when I was with my husband, that was like literally there was a car in front of us and there are turtles on it. And I had this profound experience around forgiveness and a turtle in Hawaii. And it literally had turtles and it said the word forgiven.
mm.
And your wife actually in one of her I was in one of her calls and she talked about judgment being about forgiveness. And I just really feel like I had a huge healing around that.
Now, was this experience at the church during the course of GL 28, or was it after the course?
I think it was during,
During.
yeah, I think it was actually during or towards the end of it.
Well, how beautiful and powerful. A couple of things that I want to highlight. And if you're just joining us in this conversation with Dr. Sweta Chawla here in the Human Power Series and Ally Partner TV, welcome to our show. And we've been having a profound conversation, and I have been really enjoying and being so enlightened by your shares. Thank you. One of the things that has come into this space today, in this field, this aspect of the feminine and the masculine and the divine aspect of it. I speak about the alpha and the omega energy in one of my courses, in the Ally Partner course, and I bring it also in some of our conversations in the healing seats. Women in their present evolution to establish themselves as the powerful humans and beings that you are, by virtue of all the historical atrocities that have been committed amongst us gender wise, um, have evolved, um, as many struggles end up producing into this CEO like roles. Um, and I completely understand the why. Like you were saying, this struggle of power. But in the process of doing that, then the woman is truly embodying mostly an alpha sort of state, energetically speaking. And that negates the essence of receiving, the essence of being penetrated with love, the essence of being a matrix for generating, right? To engender, to for life to be born through you,
Mhm.
which is something that outside of the realm of energetic speaking, men will never be able to have in the physical world, right? I mean, if you're a true male, right? Um, but you said something really powerful, which is now there is this, you know, use this word, I'm going to use it, almost this backlash where women are really feeling this gravitational pull to return to essence, to be in a state of receiving and relaxing, to be penetrated,
Mhm.
to emanate from them, to
Mhm.
receive, to perhaps not be the one who's driving the house and let the men take care of them, right? A lot of that, when you enter this state of gratitude, it's very interesting because the man who witnessed the woman in that energy get highly attracted to her. And paradoxically, even if she is that in his eyes CEO like sort of feminine energy, he wants to fight it to give to her. He
Right.
wants her to have what she wants.
Yes.
He wants her to be the goddess for him,
Yeah.
right? He wants her to allow him to to be loved, you know, to make love to her. And he wants to receive the love that only she can actually be a source for him that he cannot give himself.
Mhm.
And that creates an incredible sense of empowerment between the two of them in the relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
Secondly, there's a big distinction that you've made today that evidently came through your experience in GL 28, but also not just GL 28 is really the is a continuum of your life's journey that happens to have been experienced with a different degree of awareness inside of the GL 28 journey. And it's a distinction of the discomfort of the spotlight versus being light source, right? Because one of them is almost like forced, right? So if an actor and an actress is on the stage, there's somebody chasing the actor or the actress and putting the light on the person. It's an obligatory sort of event,
Right.
right? But what we're talking about here is with this permission and this state of gratitude and embodying all of this, then it's not traumatic because you start to really understand from a very deep level that you are the one who's illuminating the path wherever you may be.
Right.
When you understand that you're the light in the moment, you can't fear being in the spotlight because you're light already.
Yeah. And
Very different state. Is that resonating?
absolutely. And I do want to make a distinction because if you are the giver, right? The we what I would not want, especially if someone identifies as a healer, is that we're not the source of the light, right? It's that we're the lighthouse or we're the lantern where the light comes through.
Indeed.
We're not the source of it. And I think it's an important distinction to make because it can just go back to that CEO that you're talking about, but just in another form, right? And so I think it is important to say that. And there were some other things that you mentioned that I also want to just kind of highlight with regards to when you were talking about that CEO and the power, and and I think a lot of women, as you were saying, they see power as the way that it's been presented in the world in that CEO masculine energy. And they either try to be like it or they resist it, right? And so then you get that push and pull. You get that, like, oh, I'm doing it, but I'm burnt out. I have adrenal fatigue. I have all these things because it's not natural to how we're designed. Um, or we're like, I'm not seen. I know I have so much to give. I know I'm here to make a difference. And really, really getting that our power source, as you've already said, is the feminine is here to create. Our power is to create, it's not to control. It's not to focus, it's not to bring into, it's really to create. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I think having just having that visual or having that context can help make these things like feeling and energy and frequency just more, for lack of better words, practical or
Yes.
actual, or like, okay, now I know how to show up in this. So I think that, yeah, everything that you're saying, and, just really highlighting those pieces.
I had something really funny happen yesterday. Somebody sent me a message, um, and it says something like, "This is how I sound when I speak to people about energy and transformation and so on." And it was a clip of the comedian Steve Carell, the actor Steve Carell, when he used to be in Comedy Central, and he was going something like, and I just started cracking up because it's like, okay, this is exactly what happens to people. And they think you're making things up, right? So it's like, how do we reconcile linguistically, right? This message and like you're saying, highlighting, let me actually contextualize in a different way. So it doesn't sound like we're trying to be so elevated and so enlightened that nobody can actually understand what we're saying, because they're really practical things. And that what more practical than the pain that we experience when we're not feeling fulfilled?
Mhm.
What more practical than when there is disharmony in a marriage between a man and a woman, and they cannot really have sexual relationships that are fulfilling?
Yeah.
What more practical than not being able to parent with love, and there's anger and frustration because there's something deeply disconnected and disharmonious inside of you? We can all relate to what those things look like. I know that I've experienced all of them, all of
Yeah.
them. And along this journey and what I share in the community, as you know, Sweta, for me, it became very evident in my awareness through my meditations and so on some years back that really the purpose of life for me, and this is a very personal share, really was to come to feel.
Yeah.
Because my 30 plus years of being in medicine have really demonstrated to me that there was no place for that conversation in the healing process. And what I do know from practicing it and walking it every day with my community and doing everything I can to provide a safe place where nobody's going to be spotlit traumatized is to be able to return to being reminded of the power of feeling.
Yeah.
And you've heard me before, and I say it all the time, gratitude, which is the essence of this program, that GL28 plus feeling equals healing.
Yep.
And that connection, we have been missing it for the longest time. So I made it a point to actually make it almost like a life journey and life purpose to, in this line of work in my life, in this compartment, to really speak to it every single moment. And this actually leads me to share publicly that because of the feedback that we receive from members like yourself and others in the last so many journeys, there is such a sensitive nature or sensitivity, perhaps a better way to say it, to this whole thing of the spotlight trauma that you talk about. Um, and then the invisibility factor that we have been afflicted with one way or the other, to the point that I recognize that it's impossible for most people to want to show up for a healing moment if there is any inklings that we're being seen. It will be like having sex in public, right? It's not something that, we want to, some things we want to keep sacred and keep to ourselves.
Mm.
And the idea of being seen to such a vulnerable degree, it can be extremely uncomfortable and in some cases paralyzing.
Yeah.
So we have done everything we can, as you experience in GL28, and now migrating and starting the Alive community membership starting on April 1st of this year, completely decoupled of social media platforms like we used to be doing it inside of Facebook. Even though it's private, there's so much concern about privacy breach and so on. And, you know, it's something that we cannot neglect. And maybe you can speak to how, by having that sense of true privacy within the limitations of technology, you being somebody who teaches at Stanford, how we've been able to achieve that so that people really feel held,
Mhm.
respected, not judged, and that the container is really strong among everybody who comes in to seek that experience inside of the community.
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely. From just day one, when you kind of did the welcome call and you had, you could feel it right in the space, like the way you kind of you brought people in and they shared. And from like instantly, I think by you creating spaces for people like us who maybe have a little bit more safety in visibility, right? Um, to be vulnerable and to be authentic.
Mm.
And I'm sure that's intentional. It creates that coherence where it's like, okay, that's what this space is about. It's not a performative authenticity. I mean, genuinely, I can feel that the space was just very there was no judgment. At least there if there was, I didn't feel it. It was just
No.
incredibly people supporting one another, and just really being moved by what others had to share. You always encouraged to like listen to and read other people's shares and comment on it because there's nothing worse than being authentic and vulnerable and then like silence, right? Sometimes that can be even worse than negative. Somebody saying something
Yes.
negative, right? So, I mean, I know that there was a lot of intentionality to begin with, and it's very apparent. And I think it's a great place to build your muscles so that even if it feels scary, but you know that there's going to be value in you being able to be seen more, or even like me, somebody who is pretty visible but like up level that level. It's such a I always say, if you want to be um confident in high stakes situations, you need to practice in low stakes situations.
So, so much wisdom in that statement. So much wisdom. Thank you for sharing that. It has been intentional. As I share with my community, and if you're new watching this episode of the Human Power series here in Life Partner TV, one of the things that I have shared very openly is in the 38 years that I have been involved in one way or the other in the personal development, healing space, and medicine, and so on, that I have been on the receiving end of many experiences that I had paid for, invested in, and gone to, in some cases physically, is not really feeling that degree of safety and encouragement to everybody seal the container for us to have a transformational experience with one another and independent of one another. Still, I don't know of many places where that can happen. Certainly not to this degree. I'm hoping that more and more places in the world is happening. I'm sure we're not the only ones. That would be so arrogant to say. But I am hopeful that those of us like yourself who are in your capacity in your line of work really creating healing in the professional space through the personal transformation in the leader that is going to be standing in front of the audience to create impact with their message and desire to serve, that this is going to continue to percolate and trickle down in a really powerful and pure, respectful and judgment-free way. I think, it's not a thought, is a true knowing. We are missing that as humans. We have progressed in so many regards, and in other regards, we are being gifted with the opportunities to expand further and grow further. And it would not be possible, without the community. This is not about me, like you were saying, and I subscribe to that. There's no light rays coming out of me or anything like that. It's just the intention to really build community and allow the elements to be fostered so that we can be one another's mirrors. And the mirror is not really doing anything to you, it's just there for you to show up with it whenever you feel like you need to be reflecting your image back to you.
Yeah.
And the more I get goosebumps as I say this, the more we work together and collaborate to continue to create these experiences, not because of Mario, because of our human desire and our human capacity and the worthiness of having those experiences, the more we'll have the capacity to transcend and be one another's supporters from the heart. And I think that this is something that it's a very special condiment, ingredient inside of the Alive Partner community. Sweta, in parting thoughts, who would you say, being in the Alive Partner community and the 28-day gratitude launchpad would be for? What is coming through you to speak to that?
I mean, of course, my go I just wanna say anybody, honestly, like, I can't imagine, anyone who couldn't benefit from having more gratitude, but not it's more than gratitude, it really is, right? It's definitely a shift in how we see gratitude. I think gratitude can be a very, like, let's just go through the emotions and just make our little list, and, I mean,
Hmm.
there's science behind it. A lot of people are talking about gratitude, right? So it's not like this is new information, but it's
Hmm.
if you really have a sense of, like, I know this is important, I've tried to do it before, but it's not visceral, right? Then I definitely think this space will help you to get into a deeper relationship with gratitude. And one that's not only about positivity, right? There's a lot in the space about how do we have gratitude for the things that don't actually feel good. And how do we see everything as an offering? And I think that's definitely presenced in your teachings and in the space as well. And, the last thing that I just want to say is that when we're operating from this place of safety, like just trying to stay safe, which keeps us small,
Mm.
the reason why that happens is because other people, family, school, society wounded us. That can't be healed alone. That's
Indeed.
why being in community and being in spaces where your nervous system gets to have a different experience.
Mm.
There's people who wanna see you, people who wanna celebrate you, people who can hold your mess. That was a really nice thing about this there were some people who were like, "I just don't today I'm doing bad," right? And still showing up. And there's nobody judging that. Nobody's saying, "Oh, you should be grateful," right? It's like, no, it's the thing that I have really the thing that's helped me healed more than anything in my whole entire journey was having places where you can be witnessed.
Yes.
And to me, that's what creates that safety, right? We can never really guarantee a safe place, but I do think that it's a place where if you choose to be brave, you will definitely shift your own internal experience of safety.
Thank you. That's so powerful, and so true. I mean, clearly that's what we have, the kind of feedback that we have received from our community members. And as you know, and this is not a far-fetched statement, we saw true miracles happen in the journey, and it has happened every single time. And for all of you watching this who may not be acquainted with this conversation that Dr. Sweta Chawla and myself are having, when I talk about miracles, I don't want to sound weird or woo or anything like that. I'm really referring to those experiences that our senses are having, that your conventional wisdom, by virtue of your education and your life journey, you really cannot explain. But your senses are spot on in what they're interpreting and gathering, even if your brain, which is just a small portion of the entire experience, cannot really put words to account for what is it that is being experienced. And inside of our community, that continues to happen every single time that we have one of these experiential journeys. What a privilege and what an honor.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, a miracle is just a shift in how you see things, right? I mean, just my story, right? Same church, same, and I had a completely different experience, right? That was a
100%.
miracle. But I do want to share one last quick one.
Please.
On the very last day of GL28, when I was driving home after facilitating at Stanford, I couldn't be on the gratitude live call, the group call, so I was listening to the replay, and a woman said somebody said the word magic and sparkle, and literally in the sky, two firecrackers went off when she said those both words. And it was just two. There's never you never see just two firecrackers, right? It's always like a series. It wasn't July 4th. It wasn't like there was no holiday. And we're talking about being alive. I was drinking my alive kombucha.
Oh
And
my gosh.
so I think we can have, I don't know why we need to say it doesn't have to be woo. I think there's a lot of joy and fun in being woo woo, and it can be really practical too, like both hands, right?
Indeed, 100%. I'm so glad you felt comfortable to say that and share, because when we start practicing the undermining of the magic, life in itself is a magical thing. After 30 something years of being in medicine, if somebody were to ask me, how is it that we're alive? No physician can really tell you, right? They'll say, well, there's this chemical reaction. It's not, but why don't they then suddenly stop, right? Because some people are breatharians, so they're not quote unquote eating by traditional standards. So how come you're not dead, right? That we can go down this deep rabbit hole if we really want to fight the fact that being alive is a miracle in itself. The fact that we can actually be connecting at this level via things that we can't see, the magic of the internet and the Wi-Fi signals and this and that. We're surrounded by it. But this experience completely changes our perception, our awareness, our embracing of it, our sense of gratefulness for all of it. And when that happens, true healing happens, breakthroughs happens, and then your life becomes infinitely richer. It's always been there, but now that you're aware of it, it's like suddenly more zeros showed up in your bank account and they have been hidden somehow. And now they're being displayed. We have been in conversation today here in Life Partner TV with Dr. Sweta Chawla, transformational coach and speaker with a medical background as a pharmacist. And it's been absolutely a remarkable transformational conversation in itself. I have learned and have been enhanced massively by being in this space and sharing from you and receiving from you today. So I want to thank you. Thank you so much for your generosity, for your courage to be so vulnerable, to share with people. And I have to say, your Stanford students are absolutely privileged and should be honored and feel that to have you amongst them. I mean that very sincerely and respectfully because this is a very different kind of doing it, and it only will enhance professionals. We need more of that. If those of you have been watching this and will want to connect with Dr. Chawla and her coaching programs and her work, Sweta, how can they actually reach you for accessing your work?
So it's Dr. Sweta Chawla, Dr. Sweta Chawla. I'm sure you'll see it in the notes.
Hey, yes.
My website, my LinkedIn, my Instagram, everywhere. And I don't know when this is being aired, but I am having a free workshop on April 3rd about communicating confidently. And we're definitely going to be talking about the spotlight amongst many other
Oh,
things so
that's
that you
awesome.
can enhance your leadership and your impact and not the CEO leadership, the leadership beyond the ladder, the resourced leader, as you're
Well,
saying.
thanks for sharing that. So, as you're watching this, you can look in the links below so you can actually find information to Dr. Chala's work. And if this has been resonating with you, which I know it's going to resonate with many who are watching it, please do not hesitate to reach out to her. She's an amazingly approachable, authentic person, just the way you've been experiencing her today. That's exactly my experience of her. And I am sure that she'll be embracing your reaching out to her for being supported by her work. Sweta, thank you. Thank you for being with us today, your generosity. And please do not stop showing up in our community if it resonates with you, because every time you speak up, everybody gets transformed. That was the case. It will continue to be the case. You have so much to offer, so many gifts to share. Please do not stop, showing your light and allowing us to see you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, can I just also give my thanks to you?
Please.
It's truly a gift to have the masculine, right? In such an embodied, loving, the way you hold space. I mean, it is just really, really profound. And I think we are like starving for that energy in this world. And I know it takes a lot of courage to come from such a deeply entrained scientific background to talk about feelings as anybody, but then being a male, right? A doctor on top of that. So thank you for saying yes to your yes. Thank you for the space that you held for me and being able to complete a deep, deep cycle of wounding that was beyond lifetimes around the masculine. So I am incredibly grateful too. Thank you.
The honor has been completely mine and my privilege. For all of you, you have been watching the Alive Partner TV show in the Human Power series with Dr. Sweta Chawla. Thank you for gifting us with your generosity and your time in watching us. And don't forget to tune every single week when we go live on Wednesdays and Fridays in different platforms so that we can continue to have this conversation. Leave us a comment. And as I like to say in every single show, if this deeply resonated with you, please go ahead and share it with the people you care most in your life. This kind of information, what was shared in this conversation today, may be something that unlocks somebody else's healing, transformation, breakthrough, or miracles in their lives. And ultimately, you get to celebrate that you are a catalyst in that person's life. What a privilege to do that for somebody else. Thank you for being here, and I can't wait to see you next time. So long.